Good afternoon, students. I'm here again with another video of Indian economic development for class 12th, dealing with chapter 4, strategy of industrial growth since 1947 to 1990. In this video, we'll cover up the topics like importance of industries, role of the public sector in the front foot, then IPR 1956, and lastly, the characteristics or development of SSI. To begin with, importance of industries. Industries are the epicenter of economic growth. To prove this, as the industries grow, there is a GDP growth, there is a infrastructural growth in the economy. Industries manufacture number of wide-ranging goods which are used by the consumers. And lastly, industries are by and large overtaking agriculture. Second point, source of employment. As you all know that our agriculture is overburdened and the labor force is rising rapidly. Industries absorb lot of labor and give jobs for the survival of their economy. Source of mechanized means of farming. Due to industries only, our agriculture has become modernized because they manufacture capital goods like threshers, harvesters, tractors. Mechanization have also caused the surplus production in agriculture, which we can sell off and have little income. Next we come up with the point that imparts dynamism in the growth process. This means that from just survival, we have moved to the commercialization. Industrialization has added color and spice to our life, has given new dimensions to our life. Next point, growth of civilization. People have become conscious of the quality of life. Culturally diverse societies are getting closer to each other, and we have become a global economy just because of the industrialization. Industries also enhance infrastructural growth. As the industries come up, number of things come up like expansion of other facilities like transport, communication, banking, insurance, power generation, etc. Number of facilities crop up with the coming of the industry. Industrialization, a sine qua non of growth, means industrialization forms the base of growth. All the today's countries which are developed, they are just because of industries. As you have seen that India is still in a developing process because agriculture forms the base of it. The countries whose industrialization is the base, they are called developed. Moving on to the why public sector has a leading role to play. In this also we will cover up 2-3 points. Firstly, when we got the economy from the colonial rule, it was just 0.1 to 0.5 annual income. Moving on to another topic, why public sector was in the forefront. Why public sector had a dominating role. To begin with, when we got the economy, it was just 0.5 to 0.1% of GDP. Our annual income was that much. Lack of capital. The economy needed a big push, and at that time there were only two prominent private entrepreneurs, that were Tata and Birla. They could not shoulder the whole responsibility of the economy to build up. So government had to be in the forefront to shoulder the responsibility. Next comes the low inducement to investment. Our economy had a very small size of market, level of demand was low, low demand, low income, low investment. Everything, the whole economy was caught in a vicious cycle of low. To break this vicious cycle, the government had to play a dominant and prominent role. Growth with social justice. If the economy would have gone into the private entrepreneurs, they would only be the economy of profit maximization. The government invested with the viewpoint of social welfare, just to discourage the profit maximization and have the social interest in the prime light. That's why the government had to play a prominent and the dominant role in the forefront. These were the 3 points why public sector played a dominant role. IPR 1956. IPR policy, there was a declaration of few things. Government, there was a threefold classification of industries. What was this? The industries which were exclusively in the hands of the government were defense, energy, atomic energy, and railways. They were solely under the control of the government. Secondly, the government collaborated with the private sector, but still it played a prominent role, and the industries which were with the private and the public were fertilizer industry and mining industry. Thirdly, leaving these two categories, 1 and 2, the industries included in these two categories, rest fell in the private sector. Secondly, industrial licensing. Industrial licensing was very important. No unit, no private sector can open an industry without getting a license from the government. License means the permission. Secondly, if there was an industry existing, then too the private sector had to take a license for expanding the existing unit. This was done with the interest so that properly the resources were allocated or used, because resources were limited. And thirdly, industrial concession. This was also done with the viewpoint for the backward regions development. Government offered few concessions like subsidy in the power supply. The entrepreneurs were given subsidy on the power supply if they were ready to open in the backward areas. Then they were exempted from taxes, tax holiday you can say, if they were ready to open in the backward areas. This was to promote equality in the country. Moving on to the third topic, that is development of SSI. SSI means small scale industries. These industries played a very dominant role in the development of the country. The large scale industries were opened with the viewpoint of infrastructural development. Economy was developed as if it was a developing economy. But SSI were developed with the viewpoint of giving employment. And there were three main characteristics of SSI. Firstly, SSI is labor intensive. They are not capital intensive, means only with amount of 5 lakhs anyone can set up an industry and can generate employment. Secondly, SSI shows locational flexibility. What does this mean? This means they can be opened anywhere. Why? Because the large industries are always opened, established or located near the availability of raw material. But these industries do not need huge amounts of raw material, so they can be set up at any place. They are location flexible. And lastly, SSI needs small investment and is therefore equity oriented. With the coming up of the SSI, anyone can set up an industry. Big industries means big business houses, means economic wealth being in few hands. But SSI promoted equality in the country. Anyone with a small amount can set up an industry. That means the concentration of the wealth was not in few big entrepreneurs. It was well distributed. Moving on to another topic, salient features of the strategy of 1950 to 1990. What was the main policies on which our growth, industrial growth depended? To begin with, public sector had a dominant role. Secondly, secondary sector was given a secondary position by issuing a license and permits. Thirdly, 1950 to 1990 strategy was import substitution. What does import substitution mean now? Import substitution means producing the goods within the country which we are importing from outside. That results in saving up of our foreign exchange. Then protecting our domestic industries from the foreign competition. In two ways this was done. Heavy duties were on the imports, and secondly, fixation of import quotas. What is the quota? Quota means the quantity. The quantity was specified that this much amount can be sold in different countries. Large scale industries were opened with the view of base for the infrastructure, and small scale industries were opened with the viewpoint of employment generation. Moving on to that, nothing is free from good and bad points. So naturally, the 1950 to 1990 industrial policy did have some good points and bad points. Focusing on the good points, that economic growth got a big push and the output also increased. Secondly, there was electronic industry named Sunrise which got a big boost and it made a mark in the Indian economy. Thirdly, large industries like Rourkela, Bhilai, these huge projects in infrastructure gave the economy a big push. Then SSI achieved the objective of creating social justice and employment. To sum up, these were the good points, but everything has the negative impact also. Public sector monopolies gradually turned to be a dead social. Public sector was in a monopoly, so there was inefficiency, corruption, leakage, pilferage, means leaking of the information. People became corrupted and inefficient because they had their own monopoly. Protection of the domestic industry stimulated its growth, but they lacked competition. There was no modernization, there was no upgrading. The consumers had to buy whatever the producers offered. And lastly, the most importantly was that we had import substitution only. The point did not focus on export. Slowly and steadily, we imported few goods and our foreign exchange reserves started draining. And we reached a point when India has to pledge gold in the World Bank to get the foreign exchange, because we made things to stop the inflow, to stop the outflow of foreign exchange. but we did not look into the policy how to inflow of the foreign exchange could be done. So our reserves dried up and we had to pledge the gold. Thank you, student. This is all for today. Thank you.